Ambassador Zethakari stared at the small screen in her hands, reading the same file for the third time. The information never changed, but she kept hoping it would make more sense. Her new bodyguard was human. Not just any human, but one that looked completely ordinary by galactic standards. The hologram showed a young man with dark hair and calm eyes. Sergeant Marcus Chen, age 28 Earth years. Height 1.7 meters. Weight 80 kilograms. These numbers meant nothing to most species, but Zethkari had studied human measurements. This bodyguard was smaller than a Krillian child and weighed less than her morning meal. This must be a mistake, she said to herself. Turning to look at her other bodyguards, Thurok the Massive stood near the wall, his gray skin marked with ritual scars from 100 battles. Each of his arms was thicker than Chen's entire body. He had protected 12 ambassadors over 30 years, and none had died. When enemies saw Thurok, they usually decided talking was better than fighting. Next to him, Veltar checked her weapons with all 8 arms moving at once. The cephaloid warrior had reflexes faster than most computers and could draw 4 guns before other species could blink. Her tentacle-like arms ended in hands that never missed their target. These were real bodyguards. These were warriors that made sense. The human, according to his file, had been a soldier for only 6 years. He had no special training that she could see, no genetic modifications, no cybernetic implants. The file listed his weapons as standard human military equipment, which meant nothing to anyone in the galaxy. "Ma'am," came a voice from behind her. Zethkari turned to see a figure in simple green clothing. The human had arrived so quietly that none of them had noticed. Even Thurok looked surprised, and nothing surprised Thurok. "You are Sergeant Chen?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am. Ready for duty." His voice was calm and steady. He looked around the room, taking in everything with quick glances. His eyes stopped on each exit, each window, each place someone could hide. It was professional, but Zethkari wondered what good it would do when the real danger started. Thurok laughed, a sound like rocks falling down a mountain. "This is the famous human warrior we have heard about? I have seen stronger children on my homeworld." Veltar's tentacles moved in patterns that meant amusement in her culture. Perhaps they sent the wrong file. "This one looks like a clerk, not a fighter." Chen said nothing. He simply took his position by the door and waited. Zethkari watched him for any sign of anger or offense, but his face showed nothing. Either he did not understand their languages or he did not care what they said. "The mission briefing is in 1 hour, Zethkari announced. "We will review the situation on Nexus Station." The war between the Krillian Empire and the Vorthan Republic had been raging for 12 standard years. Entire star systems had been destroyed. Billions had died. Both species were natural predators from their homeworlds, evolved to hunt and kill. Their warriors were 3 meters tall with natural weapons that could cut through spaceship armor. Previous peace talks had failed badly. The last ambassador team had escaped with their lives only because their ship was faster than the warships that chased them. The one before that had not been so lucky. "The Krillians are insect-like but much larger than Earth insects," Zethkari explained to her team. "They have 4 arms, natural blade weapons, and can fly short distances. Their warriors are trained from birth to fight and die for the hive." She changed the display to show a Vorthan. The Vorthans are made of living crystal. They can store and release massive amounts of energy. Their warriors can create weapons from their own bodies and heal from most injuries. Thurok nodded approvingly. "These sound like worthy opponents. It will be an honor to test myself against them." "We are not there to fight," Zethkari reminded him. "We are there to make peace." "Peace," Veltar said, her voice full of doubt. "Between 2 species that have been killing each other for 12 years. Both sides believe the other must be destroyed completely. That is why the Galactic Council sent me," Zethkari said. "I have successfully mediated 17 conflicts. I know how to find common ground." Chen spoke for the first time since introducing himself. "What kind of security will be at the station?" "Standard diplomatic protection. Energy shields, weapon scanners, neutral ground rules. No weapons allowed in the main conference room except for bodyguard equipment." "What counts as bodyguard equipment?" Zethkari pulled up the list. "Traditional weapons only? Swords, clubs, energy blades. Things that require skill to use properly. The idea is that only trained bodyguards would carry them, so the risk is limited." Chen nodded and said nothing more. The journey to Nexus Station took 3 days. During that time, Zethkari watched her bodyguards prepare. Thurok practiced with weapons that could break normal bones just from their weight. Veltar ran combat simulations that would have overwhelmed most computer systems. Chen did something different. He read files about the station layout. He studied the history of both species. He watched recordings of their warriors in action, playing them over and over at different speeds. When the others rested, he exercised quietly in a small cabin. "What do you think of our human?" Sethkari asked Thurok during one of their meals. "He is too small to be useful in a real fight, but he thinks like a soldier. He prepares like one who expects trouble. Will that be enough?" Thurok shrugged, a gesture that looked like a small earthquake. "We will see. If the talks fail and fighting starts, I will protect you. The human can do what he can." On the final day of their journey, Sethkari called Chen to her office. "I need to ask you something directly. Your file says you are qualified for this mission, but I do not understand how. You are going to be protecting me from warriors who are twice your size and have natural weapons. How?" Chen was quiet for a moment, as if choosing his words carefully. "Ma'am, every species is different. They all have their strengths and their ways of fighting, but they also have their weaknesses and their patterns. I have been studying both species for weeks. I know how they move, how they think, how they react. That is good, but what will you do if they attack?" "Whatever is necessary to complete the mission, ma'am." It was not the answer she had hoped for, but something in his voice made her believe him. Not confidence exactly, but certainty, as if the outcome was already decided and he was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. Nexus Station appeared on their screens the next morning. It was a beautiful structure, built specifically for diplomatic meetings. Crystalline walls caught and reflected light in peaceful patterns. Gardens floated in zero gravity between conference rooms. Everything was designed to inspire calm and cooperation. As their ship docked, Sethkari felt the familiar mixture of hope and dread that came before difficult negotiations. So many lives depended on the next few days. If she failed, the war would continue until one species or both were extinct. She looked at her bodyguards one more time. Thurok and Veltar looked ready for battle. Chen looked ready for work. "Remember," she told them as the airlock opened, "we are here to make peace, not war." "Yes, ma'am," Chen replied quietly, but as they walked toward the conference rooms, Sethkari noticed he was already calculating distances and angles, preparing for something the rest of them hoped would never come. The main conference room on Nexus Station was meant to inspire peace. The walls were made of living crystal that grew in beautiful patterns, changing color slowly to match the mood of the room. Soft light filtered down from above, and the air smelled of flowers from a dozen different worlds. Sethkari thought it was the most beautiful room she had ever seen. She hoped it would help the negotiations succeed where others had failed. The Krillian delegation arrived first, their heavy footsteps echoing through the corridors long before they appeared. Hive Commander Vexthul led them, his black shell polished to mirror brightness. He stood nearly 3 meters tall with 4 powerful arms and wings that folded against his back like dark cloaks. Scars covered his exoskeleton, each one a story of survival in countless battles. Behind him came his warriors, each one bred for war since birth. Their natural blade weapons gleamed at their sides, ceremonial but still sharp enough to cut through steel. They moved like a swarm, thinking and acting as one mind. Vexthul's compound eyes swept the room, taking in every detail. When his gaze fell on the bodyguards, he paused. Thurok earned a nod of respect. Even Krillians recognized dangerous opponents. Veltar's 8 arms made her interesting to a species that valued multiple limbs. But when Vexthul looked at Chen, his mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. The human was so small compared to everyone else that he seemed like a child who had wandered into an adult gathering. The Vorthan delegation arrived with very different drama. War Shaper Crystallis floated rather than walked, her crystalline body catching the room's light and throwing rainbows across the walls. She was beautiful in the way that dangerous things often are, sharp edges and bright colors that warned of poison or death. Her warriors moved like living gemstones, each step creating small musical notes. They had no weapons that could be seen, but Sethkari knew they could form blades, spears, or energy weapons from their own bodies in seconds. Crystallis examined the room with the same attention as Vexthul, but when she saw the bodyguards, her reaction was different. She studied each one carefully, measuring their threat level. When she looked at Chen, her glow dimmed slightly in what Sethkari recognized as confusion. The Galactic Council sends children to guard their ambassadors now? Crystallis asked, her voice like wind chimes in a storm. Perhaps humans mature differently than we understand, Vexthul replied, though this one seems very young indeed. Chen stood perfectly still through these exchanges, his face showing nothing. Zethkari wondered if he was embarrassed or angry, but if he was, he hid it completely. Thank you all for coming, Zethkari began, using her most diplomatic voice. We are here because billions have died in this conflict, and billions more will die if we cannot find peace. She had prepared this speech carefully, choosing words that would appeal to both species. She spoke of honor and duty, of the future and the past, of children who would never be born if the war continued. The delegates listened with the patience of predators watching prey that might escape. Their warriors stood ready behind them, hands near weapons that were allowed by treaty but discouraged by common sense. The Krillian Empire has legitimate grievances, Zethkari continued. Your mining colonies were attacked without warning. Your trade ships were destroyed in neutral space. These actions cannot be ignored. Vexthul's mandibles spread slightly, agreement, or perhaps satisfaction that someone understood his people's anger. But the Vorthan Republic also has valid concerns. Your crystal gardens were bombed from orbit. Your young were targeted deliberately. These too were acts of war that demand response. Crystallis glowed brighter, her internal energy rising with her emotions. The insect spawn speak of honor while they murder children. They have no right to claim innocence. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Behind Vexthul, his warriors shifted position, wings rustling like dried leaves. The sound was a warning that every Krillian understood from birth. Our children died defending your attacks on civilian hives. Vexthul replied, his voice like grinding metal. If you cannot tell the difference between soldiers and innocents, perhaps your species deserves to be extinct. Now the Vorthan warriors moved, their crystalline forms creating haunting harmonies as they prepared for possible combat. Zethkari felt the situation slipping away from her control, just like all the previous attempts at peace. Please, she said, raising her hands for calm. We are not here to relitigate every battle of the past 12 years. We are here to find a way forward. There is no way forward with murderers, Crystallis said, her glow becoming painful to look at directly. The insects have shown their true nature. They understand only violence. Then perhaps we should speak in a language you understand, Vexthul replied. His forearms moved to the ceremonial war blades at his sides. By treaty, these weapons were allowed in the conference room, though they were supposed to remain sheathed. Behind him, his warriors began to spread their wings in challenge displays. The sound filled the room like thunder. Thurok stepped forward, his hand moving to the massive warhammer on his back. Veltar's 8 arms moved to her weapons with practiced speed. Both bodyguards understood that the situation was about to become violent. Zethkari felt her heart sinking. Another failed negotiation. Another opportunity for peace destroyed by pride and ancient hatred. The galaxy would continue tearing itself apart because no one could find a way to step back from the edge. The crystal walls of the room began to change color, shifting from peaceful blues and greens to warning reds and oranges. Even the station itself could sense that violence was coming. Vexthul's hand closed around his first warblade. The weapon was blessed by hive priests and had tasted the blood of 1,000 enemies. Drawing it in a diplomatic setting would be an insult that could not be taken back. Crystallis gathered energy into her core, preparing to release it as weapons or shields as needed. The air around her began to shimmer with heat. Both sides were seconds away from abandoning 12 years of potential peace talks for the familiar comfort of violence. Warriors who had been bred and trained for nothing but war were about to do what they did best. In the growing chaos, as weapons began to clear their sheaths and energy weapons powered up, no one was paying attention to the small human who stood quietly by the ambassador's side. No one except Chen himself, who watched everything with the calm attention of someone reading a familiar book. His hands remained at his sides, his breathing stayed steady, and his face showed no more concern than if he were watching morning exercises. But something had changed in his posture, something so subtle that even trained warriors missed it. He looked like a man who had finished waiting and was ready to begin working. The first warblade cleared its sheath with a sound like singing metal. Crystallis reached the energy level needed for combat. Warriors on both sides prepared to turn the beautiful conference room into a battlefield. And in that moment, with peace hanging by a thread and violence about to consume everything, Chen finally moved. The moment stretched like a held breath. Vexthal's war blade was halfway out of its sheath, the blessed metal catching the changing light from the walls. Crystalis blazed like a small star, her energy building to dangerous levels. Warriors on both sides prepared for the violence that had become inevitable. Zethkari watched her carefully planned peace talks crumble into dust. In seconds, this beautiful room would become a slaughterhouse, and any hope of ending the war would die with the diplomats inside it. "Your people are cowards," Crystalis said, her voice now painful to hear, distorted by the energy she contained. "You attack the weak and run from the strong. You poison water supplies and bomb nurseries because you cannot face us in honest battle." Vexthal's mandibles spread wide in fury. "We are cowards? Your crystal spawn hide behind energy shields and strike from orbit. You have never fought with honor in your miserable existence." The second warblade came free with a sound like breaking glass. The Krillian warriors behind their commander began their war chant, a low humming that made the station's hull vibrate. It was a sound that had terrified 100 worlds, the last thing many enemies ever heard. "Honor?" Crystalis laughed, and the sound shattered 2 glasses on the conference table. "You speak of honor while your raiders burn civilian transports? While your soldiers eat the wounded on battlefields? We consume fallen enemies to honor their strength," Vexthal replied, raising both blades. "But you would not understand warrior traditions. Your species has never known true combat." The insult was too much. Crystalis released a pulse of energy that made everyone's skin tingle. The air around her began to glow as she prepared to form weapons from her own crystalline structure. "I will show you true combat, insect. I will teach you what happens when you face a real predator." Behind her, the Vorthan warriors began to harmonize, their combined voices creating frequencies that made the station's metal walls sing. It was beautiful and terrifying, like music played at the end of the world. Thurok roared and pulled his warhammer free, the massive weapon designed to crush starship armor. Finally, a real fight. He had been hoping for this since they arrived. Diplomacy was boring work for a warrior. Veltar drew 4 plasma pistols with her upper arms while her lower limbs reached for shock batons. Her species could process multiple combat situations at once, making her nearly impossible to surprise. The room filled with the sound of weapons being drawn, energy being charged, and warriors preparing for death. Both sides had abandoned any pretense of diplomatic solution. Zethkari pressed herself against the wall, knowing that in seconds the conference room would become a war zone. Her bodyguards would try to protect her, but against this many elite warriors, their chances were small. She thought about the report she would never write, about the billions who would continue dying because no one could control their anger long enough to find peace. The galaxy's best hope for ending this war was about to disappear in violence and pride. Vexthal raised his war blades above his head, their edges sharp enough to cut through energy shields. "For the Hive! For the Fallen! For eternal glory!" His warriors echoed the battle cry, their voices joining with his in harmony. The sound was deafening, drowning out everything else in the room. Crystalis expanded her form, becoming larger and brighter, her entire body now a weapon waiting to be unleashed. "For the crystals! For the gardens! For the future!" The Vorthan warriors' harmony reached a crescendo, their combined voices creating standing waves in the air itself. Pieces of equipment began to vibrate apart from the sonic assault. Both groups charged toward each other, war cries filling the air. 12 years of hatred and accumulated rage finally found release. Warriors who had dreamed of glorious death rushed forward to claim it. In the center of the chaos, Zethkari closed her eyes and waited for the end, but the collision never came. Instead, a single quiet voice cut through the noise like a blade through silk. It was not loud, but somehow every warrior in the room heard it clearly. "That's enough." The charging warriors stopped as if they had hit invisible walls. The war cries died in their throats. Even the harmonizing Vorthons fell silent. Everyone turned to look at the source of the voice. Chen stood exactly where he had been before, his position unchanged, his hands still at his sides. But something was different. The air around him seemed thicker, more dangerous. Every survival instinct that the warriors possessed suddenly screamed warnings. The human looked completely ordinary. He had not drawn a weapon or raised his voice or made any threatening gesture. But every predator in the room suddenly understood that they were no longer the apex killers they had always believed themselves to be. "You want to fight?" Chen asked, his voice still conversational and calm. "That's fine. Fighting is what you do, but let's establish some ground rules first. Vexthul's compound eyes fixed on the human, trying to understand what had changed. This small, weak creature had somehow stopped a room full of elite warriors with nothing but words. "You think you can threaten us, human?" the Hive commander asked, though his voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. "You are one against dozens. You have no natural weapons, no armor, no energy attacks." "That's true," Chen agreed pleasantly. "I'm not as strong as you or as tough or as naturally armed. Your species evolved to be perfect predators. So did theirs." He glanced at Crystallis, who was still glowing but no longer advancing. "But here's the thing about humans that most species don't understand until it's too late." Chen took a single step forward, and every warrior in the room took a step back without meaning to. Their bodies reacted before their minds could stop them. "We didn't evolve to be predators. We evolved to be survivors. There's a difference." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. The beautiful crystal walls shifted to colors that had no names, patterns that hurt to look at directly. A predator is perfectly adapted to hunt specific prey in a specific environment. Change the environment, introduce new variables, and the predator struggles. Another step forward, another unconscious retreat from warriors who had never retreated from anything. But a survivor adapts to everything. We learn, we improvise. We find ways to win that the perfect predators never consider because they've never needed to. Chen's voice remained calm and friendly, like a teacher explaining a simple concept to students who were having trouble understanding. "So yes, you're right. I can't match you for strength or speed or natural weapons, but I've been watching you for 3 days now, studying how you move, how you think, how you react." He looked around the room, making eye contact with each warrior in turn. "And I've noticed something interesting. For all your evolution and training and natural advantages, you all make the same basic mistakes." The silence in the room was complete now. Even the station's background humming seemed to have stopped. "Would you like me to show you what I mean?" What happened next would be debated in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Veterans who had seen every form of combat known to civilized space would argue about the details until their dying days. But everyone agreed on one thing. It lasted exactly 3 minutes. The first minute was about disbelief. Vexthul, who had never backed down from any challenge in his life, heard his own voice say, "Show us, human." He did not remember deciding to speak. The words just came out as if someone else was controlling his mandibles. Chen nodded politely. "Thank you. First lesson, you telegraph your attacks." He pointed at the Hive commander. "When you prepared to charge, your wings spread exactly 1.7 seconds before you moved. Your warriors all looked at your primary target before selecting their own, and your war cry lasted 4.3 seconds, giving everyone in the room time to prepare." As he spoke, Chen moved. Not quickly, his steps were casual, almost lazy. But somehow he was closer to Vexthul than he had been a moment before. Predators announce themselves because fear is part of their hunting strategy, but survivors strike without warning. Chen's hand moved just slightly, and somehow Vexthul's first war blade was no longer in his grip. The blessed weapon clattered to the floor, its metal ringing against the crystal surface. The Hive commander stared at his empty hand in confusion. He had been holding the blade. He was still holding it, except he was not holding it at all. Second lesson, Chen continued, now standing beside Crystallis. Energy weapons require build-up time. You gathered power for 12 seconds before reaching combat readiness. That's very impressive, but it means you're broadcasting your intentions. Crystallis tried to release the energy she had stored, tried to form weapons from her crystalline structure. Nothing happened. She felt empty, drained, as if someone had pulled a plug and let all her power flow away. "How?" she whispered. "Simple physics," Chen replied. "Energy wants to flow from high concentration to low concentration. I just gave it somewhere else to go." The second minute was about impossibility. The Krillian warriors attacked as one, their hive mind coordination perfect. 16 blade-armed killers moved in patterns that had been refined over millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of warfare. They moved like poetry, like music, like death itself given form. Chen moved like water finding the lowest path down a mountain. Where they were, he was not. Where they struck, nothing met their blades. He flowed between them, around them, through them, and somehow all their weapons ended up in his hands. Veltar tried to track his movement with all 8 arms and failed. Her computer-fast reflexes could not lock onto something that seemed to exist in multiple places at once. She drew all 4 plasma pistols and fired at the same target. The energy bolts hit each other in midair and dissipated harmlessly. Chen was standing exactly where she had aimed, but he was also still moving, as if the laws of physics had agreed to bend around him rather than be broken. "Third lesson," he said, somehow behind her now, all 4 pistols in his hands. "Multiple attackers are only effective if they can coordinate without interfering with each other. But when you're all targeting the same threat, you become predictable." Thurok roared and swung his warhammer with enough force to dent starship armor. The massive weapon whistled through the air where Chen had been standing a microsecond before. The human was now holding the hammer, though no one had seen him take it. Fourth lesson: weapons are tools, not extensions of yourself. If you depend on them completely, you're helpless without them. The third minute was about acceptance. By now, every warrior in the room understood that they were facing something beyond their experience. This was not superior technology or genetic modification or alien enhancement. This was pure skill, refined to levels they had never imagined possible. Chen stood in the center of the room, surrounded by the galaxy's most elite warriors, holding their weapons in his hands. He had not struck a single blow in anger. He had not injured anyone. He had simply proven that violence was no longer an option for anyone but him. "Final lesson," he said, setting the collected weapons in a neat pile on the conference table. "The deadliest predators in any ecosystem are usually not the largest, the strongest, or the most naturally armed. They're the ones that think differently." He looked around the room at warriors who had been reduced to spectators, at their own defeat. Humans didn't become apex predators by being bigger or stronger or tougher than everything else. We did it by being smarter, more adaptable, and more creative. We learned to use tools, to work together, to think ahead. Chen returned to his position beside Ambassador Zethkari, his hands clasped behind his back in a relaxed parade rest. But most importantly, we learned when not to fight, because the greatest victory is the one that achieves your objectives without bloodshed. The silence that followed was unlike anything any of them had experienced. It was not the quiet of fear or the pause before battle. It was the silence of minds being fundamentally changed, of worldviews being rebuilt from scratch. Vexthul stared at his empty hands, then at the human who had disarmed him without apparent effort. What are you?" "I'm a bodyguard," Chen replied matter-of-factly. "My job is to protect Ambassador Zethkari so she can complete her mission. Everything I just did was removing obstacles to that objective. Crystallis had regained some of her glow, but it was dim and uncertain. Are all humans like you?" Chen considered the question seriously. "No, ma'am. Every human is different. Some are scientists, some are artists, some are engineers, some are soldiers like me. But they all think like you? They all fight like you?" "No, ma'am. I'm just a bodyguard. There are humans who are much more dangerous than I am, in their own specialties." The implications of this statement hit the room like a physical blow. If this impossibly capable human was just an ordinary soldier in his species' hierarchy, what did that say about humanity's true potential? Zethkari, who had watched the entire demonstration with growing amazement, finally found her voice. "I believe," she said carefully, "that we should return to our peace negotiations." Both delegations looked at her, then at Chen, then at the pile of their weapons on the table. "Yes," Vexthul agreed quietly. "I think that would be unwise." "An excellent suggestion," Crystallis added, her voice much calmer than it had been minutes before. For the first time since the negotiations began, both sides seemed genuinely interested in finding a peaceful solution. The conference room felt different now. The same crystal wall still shifted through their peaceful colors. The same soft light still filtered down from above. But something fundamental had changed in the air itself. The warriors who had entered ready to die gloriously now spoke in quiet voices, their aggression replaced by a new understanding of what was possible in a galaxy where humans existed. Ambassador Zethkari had been conducting peace negotiations for over 20 years. She had seen proud species humbled by military defeat, desperate factions forced to compromise by economic pressure, and bitter enemies reconciled by shared threats. But she had never seen anything like this. Warriors voluntarily setting aside their weapons because they had been shown a perspective they never knew existed. "Let us begin again," she said, her voice steady despite the incredible events she had just witnessed. "We are here because both your peoples have suffered tremendous losses. The question is not who is to blame for the past, but how we can build a different future." Vexthul sat heavily in his chair, his forearms resting on the table. Without his war blades, he looked smaller somehow, less intimidating. But there was something new in his compound eyes. Not defeat, but curiosity. "Human," he said, turning to look at Chen. "Your species. How long have you been traveling among the stars?" "About 200 years," Chen replied from his position by the wall. 200 years, Vexthul repeated slowly. "My people have been spacefaring for over 3,000 years. The crystals for even longer, yet in 3 minutes you showed us combat techniques we had never imagined." Crystallis had dimmed to her normal brightness, but her voice still carried the harmonic undertones of her species. "It raises questions about what else we do not know about your people. What else we do not know about each other," Zethkari corrected gently. "That is always the root of conflict, assuming we understand our opponents when we do not." She activated the holographic display in the center of the table. "The Krillian Empire controls 47 star systems. The Vorthan Republic holds 31. Both of your civilizations span hundreds of worlds and billions of citizens." The display showed the border regions where most of the fighting had occurred. Entire solar systems marked in red, destroyed or abandoned during 12 years of warfare. "But look at this from a different perspective," Zethkari continued, changing the display. "Here is the same region of space but showing resource distribution." Now the map revealed something different. Krillian systems were rich in heavy metals and rare minerals essential for advanced technology. Vorthan space contained unique crystalline formations that could store and channel energy more efficiently than any artificial technology. "You have been fighting over territory," Zethkari observed, "but you have never considered cooperation. Each of your species possesses resources the other desperately needs." Warshaper Crystallis leaned forward, studying the display. "The insects, the Krillians, they mine elements that we require for growth and reproduction. We have been forced to synthesize them at great cost. And your crystal formations," Vexthul admitted reluctantly, "could solve our energy storage problems. Our ships consume enormous amounts of fuel because we cannot store power efficiently. So instead of trading for what you need," Zethkari said, "you have been trying to take it by force. The result is that both your civilizations have grown weaker, not stronger." She pulled up casualty reports, economic data, and infrastructure assessments. The numbers were staggering. Both empires had spent so much on warfare that their citizens were suffering shortages of basic necessities. "This is the true cost of your conflict," she said. "Not just the ships destroyed or the soldiers killed, but the technologies not developed, the colonies not established, the children not born because their parents died in battles that accomplished nothing." The room fell silent as both delegations absorbed the data. They had been so focused on fighting each other that they had never stepped back to see the bigger picture. Chen spoke for the first time since his demonstration. "Ma'am, permission to ask a question?" Zethkari nodded. "Of course. Commander Vexthul, Warshaper Crystallis, what did your species hope to achieve by winning this war?" Both leaders looked at him with expressions that mixed respect and uncertainty. After what they had witnessed, every human question seemed to carry hidden depths. Vexthul answered first. "Total victory. The elimination of the Vorthan threat to our expansion. And after that, once you controlled all the territory, what then?" The Hive commander paused as if he had never considered the question. "Continued expansion, I suppose. Finding new worlds to colonize, new resources to exploit." Chen turned to Crystallis. "And you, ma'am?" "The protection of our people. The Krillians are a plague that spreads across the galaxy, consuming everything in their path. We sought to stop them before they destroyed us completely." "So your goal was defensive?" "Of course. We are not conquerors like the insects." Chen nodded thoughtfully. "So you're fighting for expansion, and you're fighting for protection. But you're both fighting over the same limited resources in the same small region of space." He gestured toward the holographic display. "What if I told you there was a way for the Krillians to expand faster than ever before, and for the Vorthans to be more secure than ever before, and it didn't require either of you to fight?" Both leaders stared at him. "Impossible," Vexthul said. "Humans specialize in impossible things. Chen replied with a slight smile. Ambassador, may I? Zethkari gestured for him to continue, fascinated by this new side of her quiet bodyguard. Chen approached the display and began manipulating the controls with surprising expertise. The holographic map zoomed out to show a much larger region of space. Here's what you're both missing, he said. You're fighting over maybe 50 star systems when there are thousands of unexplored systems in this region alone. But neither of your species can effectively colonize them alone. The display highlighted hundreds of star systems beyond the current borders of both empires, Krillian. Expansion is limited by energy technology. Your ships are powerful but inefficient. You can reach new systems, but establishing permanent colonies is expensive and difficult. Vexthol's wings rustled with interest despite himself. Vorthon expansion is limited by mineral resources. Your energy storage and transmission capabilities are incredible, but you need raw materials to build the infrastructure. Crystallis began to glow brighter as she understood where Chen was leading. But working together, you could establish colonies and systems that neither of you could develop alone. Krillian mining and construction capabilities, powered by Vorthon energy technology. The display showed theoretical trade routes and shared colony sites, a network of cooperation spanning hundreds of worlds. The galaxy is vast, Chen continued. There's room for both your civilizations to expand for thousands of years without ever competing for the same resources again. The only thing stopping you is the assumption that you have to be enemies. The silence that followed was different from any that had come before. This was not the quiet of shock or fear, but of minds racing through possibilities they had never considered. Finally, Warshaper Crystallis spoke. This would require unprecedented cooperation between our species. We have been enemies for so long that many of our people consider hatred of the other to be a sacred duty. True, Vexthul agreed. The Hive Queens have sworn blood oaths to see your species extinct. Changing that will not be simple, but not impossible? Chen asked. Both leaders looked at him, then at each other, then at the vast display of unexplored space surrounding their small, war-torn region. Not impossible, Vexthul said slowly. Difficult, Crystallis added, but perhaps not impossible. Zethkari felt something she had not experienced in years, genuine hope. Then let us begin discussing the details. How do we turn centuries of hatred into a foundation for cooperation? As the negotiations continued through the day and into the night, Chen returned to his position by the wall. He said nothing more, but his presence seemed to remind everyone in the room that the impossible was just another word for something that hadn't been tried yet. The treaty signed 3 days later would become known as the Chen Accords, though the human himself never claimed credit for the breakthrough. It established not just peace between the Krillian Empire and Vorthon Republic, but the framework for the first truly cooperative interstellar civilization. Within a generation, Krillian Vorthon colonies would span hundreds of systems. Their combined fleets would explore regions of space that neither species could have reached alone. Their shared technologies would revolutionize energy storage, space construction, and terraforming. But the most significant change was not technological or territorial. It was philosophical. The galaxy's species began to understand that cooperation might be more powerful than competition, that diversity of thought and capability could achieve more than uniformity of purpose. And at the center of this new understanding was a quiet recognition that humans, these small, seemingly weak newcomers, possessed capabilities that none of the established species had fully grasped. As their ship departed Nexus Station, Ambassador Zethkari filed her report with the Galactic Council. Her recommendation was brief but urgent. Immediate revision of humanity's threat assessment required.